Hey class, welcome to today's masterclass on block formatting. Now, at this point in the semester, I'm going to assume that many of you are old pros when it comes to block formatting, that basic style of formatting that we use in a business context. But if you need a refresher, please make sure that you rewatch the video lecture on block formatting and business documents. Because in this video lecture, we're going to build on that foundation and discuss some higher level tips that you can use to enhance the visual appeal of your writing. And the first tip is this. You want to choose your fonts strategically. You want to know how to choose the right font for a given scenario, given business writing situation. And to choose your fonts strategically, you don't need to know the identity of hundreds of different fonts. Instead, you basically just need to know the two major font families. The two major font families are sans serif fonts and serif fonts. Sans serif fonts are characterized by the absence of serifs, whereas serif fonts have serifs. That, of course, begs the question, what are serifs? The word serif is just a fancy name for those little hooks and pointers that you see on some fonts. Now, these hooks and pointers, yes, they're kind of there as an aesthetic feature, but they also serve an important purpose. Those hooks and pointers help guide your reader's eye along the line of text. And as a result, serif fonts facilitate easy reading. That's the reason why textbooks and novels tend to use serif fonts, because serif fonts help your reader read quickly. As a result, you want to use serif fonts for the body sections of longer documents. By contrast, you want to use sans serif fonts for titles, headers, and short documents because unlike serif fonts, sans serif fonts slow your reader down. Okay, it doesn't make a huge difference in terms of the speed of reading, but there is a significant difference there, and so you want to use these different font families for different purposes. Some common sans serif fonts include Calibri or Arial, whereas some common serif fonts include Garamond and Times New Roman. Now, let's look at how we can use these principles in a sample message with the goal of enhancing the sample message's visual appeal. So take a look at the screen here. We've got some sample text, and you'll notice that at present, the entire text is written using sans serif fonts. Now, the first thing we can do to enhance the visual appeal of this document is convert the text in the paragraphs, the body of the paragraphs, into a serif font, again to expedite easy reading while keeping those headers in a sans serif font. Next tip, you want to avoid short generic headings. Instead, you want to use longer descriptive headings that preview your point. You want to avoid headings like problems or solutions, which don't tell your reader much about the section that header introduces. Instead, you want to use longer headings like guidelines for effective lists, a fresh approach to our staffing challenge, or PIP membership provides access to data. Think about headings a bit like subject lines. Obviously, you don't want to write a heading or a subject line with 50 words. You don't want to just, write a novel in your subject line or in your heading, but you do want to take advantage of that prime real estate. These are portions of your writing, whether it's the subject line or the heading, that your reader is likely to pay careful attention to. And so you want to use those elements to their fullest. You want to maximize their capacity to summarize either the purpose of a message in the case of a subject line, or the purpose of a section in the case of a heading. So let's go back to our sample document and think about how we can enhance these rather generic headings, overview, and policies. Not surprisingly, we're going to make them a bit longer. We're going to make them a bit more descriptive so that we now have results of recent AXR Human Resources survey and updates to AXR pay and benefits policy. Next tip, you want to reserve lists for parallel information. You want to use them sparingly. You want to keep them short, and you want to frame them consistently. Now, I'm not knocking bulleted or numbered lists. They're great, but in a business context, we do have a tendency to overuse these formatting features. And if you overuse bulleted and numbered lists, they lose their power, right? These formatting features are powerful precisely because they stand out. But if everything becomes a bulleted or numbered list, then your text no longer stands out. So let's take a look at how we can use this tip in the context of our sample message. In that second paragraph, many of you might have noticed that we have some parallel information. So let's take that and break it out into a bulleted list. Now note that we're keeping this relatively short. We've only got 5 bullets here, and we're also keeping all of this information parallel. All right. So we're using a bulleted list sparingly. We're using it to frame parallel information, and we're keeping our list short. Next tip. Format your document's design elements consistently to maintain a cohesive, unified look. This tip is pretty obvious. You want your document to look cohesive. Now, of course, you should feel free to use different fonts in your message. We've just talked about how you can combine both sans serif and serif fonts, but you nevertheless want to limit the number of fonts overall that appear in your document. Ideally to, let's say, to max 3. And you want to use them consistently in different parts of your message. So you want to reserve your sans serif fonts for just introductory text, headings, and things that you want to really pop out. And then you want to use the same serif font for text that you want your readers to navigate more quickly. So let's look at this in the context of our sample document. The sharpest among you may have noticed that we've got actually 4 fonts going on in this message. So let's just dial the number of fonts in this message back to 2 so that we only have Century Gothic for our headers, and we then have Gothic for the body text. Next tip. Organize your documents for easy scanning and put information where your readers will see it. And how you approach this tip is going to depend on whether you're producing a paper document or an electronic document. And you approach organization of different kinds of documents differently because readers scan different kinds of documents differently. They scan paper documents using what we describe as an F pattern. And that means that they basically look all the way across the top of the page. And then as their eyes move down the page, they tend to concentrate on information along the left-hand margin. As a result, if you're producing a paper document, you want to put your most important information in either the top right, the top left, or along the left-hand margin. If you're producing an electronic document, on the other hand, readers tend to use a Z pattern. In other words, they scan across the top of the text, then their eyes move down diagonally and to the left, and then they move across the text again at the bottom of the screen. So if you're producing an electronic document, you want to put key information towards the corners. All right. Now let's see how we can implement this tip in our sample text. And for the purpose of this tip, let's imagine that we want to add a data visualization to our message. In that case, we'd want to put our data visualization in the top right-hand corner so that when readers use the F pattern, and let's assume that this is a paper document, they're going to look at that important text in the upper left-hand corner. They're going to look at that data visualization in the upper right-hand corner. and then they're going to pay attention to the information along the left-hand margin, which includes our header and that bulleted list, right? We're keeping as much information as possible out of that dead zone in the lower right-hand corner. Now, finally, our last tip. Remember that white space is an important element of document design. Blank space is not something to be minimized. It's something that you want to use strategically and enhance as much as possible, including white space, including blank space on your page. It makes your document look more inviting. It makes your document look shorter. It makes your document easier to read, and it makes it look more thoughtfully constructed. Let's take a look at what a huge difference adding white space can make to our sample document. If you look at this document here, everything looks a bit cramped. It looks a bit packed together, and as a result, it looks rather uninviting. Now let's look at what happens when we add that white space. All of a sudden, the document just looks significantly more inviting than it did without that white space. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of this video lecture. If you're interested in learning more about how to create effective data visualizations, like the one we saw in our sample message, please make sure that you watch the video lecture on data visualizations. Thanks for watching, everybody.